I don't think that people really understood the freedom that you had here. You could have fun. You could be a kid. You could make some boo-boos and somebody would just take you by the back of the neck and take you home.
It was amazing. It was wonderful. It was, as far as I'm concerned, every child's dream.
In 1970, the kids of Newport Beach, California had lots of reasons not to play high school football.
When I was a kid, I used to live up in the Heights on Santa Ana. We'd walk to the beach from there, ride bikes. My entire repertoire was a volleyball, pair of fins, and a pair of trunks.
Newport Harbor was well known for being snappy dressers. As far as being meat-eating football players, come on.
Newport falling all over each other in the backfield, and the pass is incomplete.
Oh, I guess when I was 8, my stepfather decided to put my brothers and I into Pop Warner.
That was the thing about our team at Newport Harbor is there really wasn't that many people that had played Pop Warner football.
I got the crap kicked out of me just about every day. I hated it, really, be honest with you. I loathed football.
We certainly didn't have the size or the speed or the talent that a lot of these football programs had. We were just a bunch of Newport Beach pussies.
Few at Newport Harbor High School had much football experience, but that didn't deter them from signing up for the team.
It was kind of the thing to do when we went to Newport Harbor was you signed up for freshman football because that's what all your buddies were doing.
I think back then it was a natural to want to play sports if you had any talent at all. Certainly if you were going to try to bag any cheerleaders, it helped to be a team player.
It was the thing to do. Most of my close friends were going out.
As one might expect, Newport Harbor excelled at water polo, surfing, sailing, and tennis. But football was another story. Since the school's founding in 1930, they had captured Southern California's Sunset League championship only once, in 1942. For the rest of the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, Newport lost more games than they won.
If you looked back at Newport, Newport had some great athletes, but could never win a championship.
The records of the teams, if you go back, were never stellar. The football program, I think, was always hampered by the fact that it was a privileged community, and you had some kids who really didn't need to or want to play football other than their parents probably made them play football. It was never a serious program dedicated to high level of athletes and winning seasons.
As if trying to shake a 3-decade-long losing streak wasn't hard enough already. In 1970, some of Newport Harbor's athletes were hesitant to even join the football team.
There was a lot of underlying tensions by being an athlete or even just participating in anything that's formal. Was not exactly the most popular people in school, which is not probably what it is today.
We were kind of caught in the transition between being conventional and traditional and patriotic, and then we were also kind of in the free love and rock on and party hard.
That was the time when the classes, we sat in beanbag chairs and got a little bit more respect from the teachers than we had years before.
We had a lot of good athletes that were surfers and didn't play ball because it was lining up too much with the jock thing. So you were a jock, you kept your hair short, you were more disciplined, versus being the hippies or the folks that Just didn't want to go status quo. So it was a real split kind of down that hippie surfer line on one side, and all the athletes were the jocks and kind of viewed as the right wing guys.
Would you describe yourself as a hippie in those days?
Definitely, and proud of it.
Estranged from his own family, and after a hitchhiking trip to Canada, Buddy Owens was taken in by the family of quarterback Alvin White.
He had pictures of the all-star quarterbacks of that time. Joe Namath, Johnny Unitas over on his side of the room. Then my side of the room had pictures of, the Black Panthers, Angela Davis, Eldridge Cleaver, the black political radical group at the time. And guys would come over for the film, I guess, on whatever night, go, what the hell happened to this dude, How'd he go from Johnny Unitas to Eldridge Cleaver?
As a child, I have very vivid memories of, we were at Harborview Elementary School. I think I was either in the 3rd or the 4th grade, and just so happens the whole classroom were watching TV and the day that John Kennedy was assassinated. And from there, we go to the Watts riots, and our whole country was in turmoil.
People were dying. I mean, this was 1970, and the news was, blood and guts, and our buddies going over there and dying.
Perhaps the most polarizing issue in 1970 was America's involvement in Vietnam.
I was totally against what was going on. I mean, it was a war that was in our living rooms every night. You would go home and you'd see the body count.
Our numbers came out, your draft number. Mine was number 98.
I can remember going and registering for the draft with a few other of my close friends, and I think at the same time we were looking at places in Baja, California where we thought we might relocate if our numbers came up.
Had I been born 15 minutes earlier, I was going to be in the top 15. So I went and gave my mom a big hug and thanked her for waiting.
Surrounded by social turmoil, and with the threat of the draft weighing heavy on the minds of the older players, the Newport Harbor football team had plenty of distractions going into the 1970 season. Hoping to beef up their football competitiveness, in 1965, Newport hired Wade Watts to serve as head football coach.
When I ended up going to Newport Harbor, that was Wade Watts' first year. So here was this coaching staff coming from Ohio, talking about Ohio high school football, and they had been all part of it, and trying to say everything's going to change here, we're going to get really serious about football and the rest. It was like, okay. And there was one thing about, Wade Watts, is he was serious.
He was won like Coach of the Year in the state of Ohio for several times over. There was a commitment in Newport Harbor, in Newport Beach, to try and get the program on its feet and viable. And they brought him from Ohio to do that.
He was kind of a taskmaster, authoritative figure. He got results, in his way.
He had us running into walls and, goal posts, and take us 15 yards apart and run us head on into each other. And if you didn't think you'd put every single ounce into running head on, you'd do it again.
There's several of us who were not going to play our senior year. And then when Wade Watts got hurt and found out he was not going to coach, then we decided to play again.
Well, Wade Watts was asked to give up the job, which he did. And they wanted to get somebody that, that had a name, was proven.
When Wade Watts left, there was a void there, and so a neighbor of mine and I approached athletic director Jules Gage, who had been my high school assistant football coach, and asked him, talk to him, who are we going to get and how do we go about doing it? Can we help? We discussed who was coaching at that time, and Claire Van Horbeck, of course, was the premier coach of Orange County. So I gave him a call. He was flattered to be considered and asked to come to Newport, and he says it's a great place, a beautiful community. Thank you very much, but no, I won't. I'm not interested. And so the second name, of course, that was in the bag was Ernie Johnson.
we heard that Wade Watts left the program, and then we heard this guy named Ernie Johnson was coming in. He was coming in from El Rancho.
And it was like, wow, here's this guy coming from, you know, the barrio, you know, El Rancho, and he's won everything.
By 1970, Ernie Johnson had established himself as one of the best coaches in Southern California, and perhaps one of the best coaches in the country.
I had no idea of what greatness we were in the presence of. That in, I think it's 12 seasons at El Rancho, he won the conference all but 3 times. He was in CIF finals 5 times, won it 3 times, and he won the national title.
He had beaten Claire Van Orbeck in Anaheim at the Coliseum for the CIF championship. And not only was it a CIF championship, I think it was a state of California championship and a national championship.
I must have spent 5 years, man, and I worked all the time. It cost me a couple wives and things like that, but
well, it was like nothing else I've ever had in my life, as far as somebody having an impact on your life. He was in all parts of your life. It was like having your father with you, for me anyway. And my father was the most important man in my life, but Ernie was that guy that you wanted to do so well for. He was, let me apologize here.
I don't know of anyone that I would have any more confidence in, or anyone that I would consider a coach was equal with Ernie Johnson. I played against a lot of coaches, and I think that he accomplished everything on the high school level that any coach would ever dream of accomplishing.
The players appreciated his intensity. They bought into his system, his scheme, his philosophy. He was going to make them feel like they were the toughest. They were the most competitive. They were going to be the guys that they could get it done.
Every one of our football games at El Rancho, didn't matter who we were playing, didn't matter if you were freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, the El Rancho Stadium was packed every time.
Given Johnson's winning record, many were surprised to hear he would be taking over Newport's struggling program.
I often wonder why he would have decided to take that position, because he knew our record enough, he knew where we were. It must have been a real interesting decision for him to say, I'm going to go and try to make a bunch of powder puffs and a program that's very unsuccessful in historical terms, and see just how I can turn it around.
it was not Pop Warner. This is not club football. We're not out here to have fun. We're out here to knock folks on their butt.
Newport was not only a new world for Johnson in terms of their football pedigree, it was a completely different type of town.
Imagine him coming from where he came from and the type of kids that he was coaching in El Rancho, and coming to Newport Harbor and the type of kids that he was coaching there. Different completely.
I knew I was moving from an economic opposite of where I had been. And I realized that when I drove up in my Chevy and parked it next to the Mercedes, and I realized that this is a different thing.
It must have been a bizarre, very challenging choice for EJ, because his background and his previous coaching positions were so much different than what Newport Harbor High was when he came there.
I do remember Ernie coming into that locker room. He looks around as he says, God, isn't it great to be young in Newport? He says, look at you guys. You're all tan. This is a great spot.
Brad Hovey lived down, I think, in Dover Shores, if I'm not mistaken. Brad didn't play a bunch, but I tell you what, he was out there every day and worked as hard as he absolutely could. But they had a Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud. And Ernie saw him getting out. They dropped him off right in front of the gym there one day, and he gets out to go to school. And I tell you what, Ernie milked that for, I think, the rest of the season. Nobody in at El Rancho's and Whittier's ever seen a Rolls Royce in their life, let alone been in one, let alone get taken to school in one.
When I met his folks, we went to his house. They had a pool, though they were surrounded by water. They had a pool, and they had 2 or 3 boats tied up along the dock outside. And I looked up and I, my God, you could see all the way to Guam.
He had a rough time dealing with wealth. He always talked about his Pico Rivera, poor kids, and he really liked being the underdog. He was generally, I think, uncomfortable being in the environment of Newport Harbor as, wealthy folks that were, in his mind, privileged, and he didn't like that.
I was born in a cotton picker shack on a cotton farm, and my folks didn't own the farm. They picked cotton. I always said with a start like that, anything's up.
Here's what we always felt. Coach Johnson presented us as the just one step out of jail, one step, gangs, and it was a rough community. And I think the number one thought was, how's he going to deal with these rich kids when is his message still going to be accepted? Is it going to be as powerful as it was with, we thought, a lot of at-risk kids?
We were all wondering how he was going to fit in, because he was very successful over there, and we were all wondering how he was going to fit in. And I'll never forget when we first met, his charisma was such that it was just so electrifying that he was like, like Walter Brewer said to me one time, he said, he was like a religion. You just listen to this man, you say, shit, let's go to war. I'll go do anything for this man. He was just a fabulous, fabulous motivator.
First time I met him was the meeting in the cafeteria. Parents, players, everybody. When Ernie basically laid out his philosophy of life and football, how football relates to life, hard work, determination, all these things will make you a success, no matter if we're a successful football team or not.
He got me. Yeah, think of the movie, that old expression, you had me at hello. He pretty much had me at that first meeting. I don't know how long he talked, but by the time he got through with his speech, I was a disciple.
He had an aura about him that was undeniable, and everyone felt it.
I can remember thinking that this guy looked small. He was kind of a smaller frame guy. Definitely had the General Patton haircut. And I can remember going into the locker room and he'd start telling us stories and lecturing to us. And it was captivating because, one, he had such an engaging personality, and two, he just had a presence that everybody just all of a sudden dropped their jaw and listened.
I right away saw he had that that glow, that charisma. Somebody you could trust, believe in. And if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't even gone out.
As hard-nosed as he was, you could feel the compassion underneath that and the knowing of the guys.
I think immediately I felt that he was something special, not to the degree that it turned out to be, but the difference between Watts and Ernie was so dramatic that it was apparent immediately that regardless of how we were going to do in the season, that this was going to be a different year.
His personality was contagious. It was contagious with his staff. It was contagious with his players. And when you played in an Ernie Johnson football team, you knew you were going to play a very aggressive group of young people who were certainly typifying the Ernie Johnson approach to football.
He just set the bar high, but we didn't feel pressured into doing it. It was really, you can do this.
Before Ernie, Wade never discussed formations, anything with us. We were never required to have study books. We were never, and so I remember in the very first part of fall practice, he had handed us a playbook and said, go home. And we came back the next day. Most of us couldn't answer the questions. Ernie said, what is the wishbone, show me a wishbone, show me an eye. And I mean, he was furious. It was like, you're a bunch of lazy surfers, you know, what kind of a pile of, you know, worthless scum are you?
Before that, there never was any summer program, or it was like, okay, you guys are going to be here, 3 times a week. It's like, what? You got to be kidding me. I'm going to the beach.
Before the start of the regular season, Newport played a scrimmage against perennial powerhouse Mater Dei High School.
Well, it was pretty scary because that was an ass kicking in every way, shape, and form.
Mater Dei was, of course, always a strong program and had great legacy of football players and great success. I think EJ specifically decided to grab one of the top opponents and show us what it really could be like, purposely letting us take a punishment for the training process thereof.
I think Mater Dei took it easy on us, actually. I think it could have been worse than what it was. They scored 9 times, I think it was, and in every shape and form that they could. Run, pass, interception, return, didn't matter.
They kind of played just like we were like a JV team. That's how easy it was for those guys.
I remember hitting a guy head on and getting a concussion and forgetting the whole day before.
They took it to us. There was no doubt about it. These guys were big, strong, disciplined, and we came out there and didn't do such a good job. And when Ernie finally sat us down and in no uncertain terms told us the only people that really are going to support you are your parents, because I didn't see anything out of you guys. And again, another motivator from the psychological wizard.
Oh, Kelly, we were so bad. In fact, I think Mater Dei lost their first 2 games because their running backs were exhausted from the scrimmage.
What Johnson never told the rest of the team was that scrimmage had gone exactly as planned.
I don't know if you realize that or not, but Ernie threw that scrimmage. He wanted you guys to get desperate. And we knew going into that scrimmage we were going to do some things that weren't going to work, and he just wanted to see whether you could handle it or not. And it worked.
That Mater Dei scrimmage was probably a blessing in disguise for us, because we were really able to gather ourselves after that and suck it up and just go forward and go into the very first game with a whole different attitude and approach.
The first regular season game was against crosstown rival Corona Del Mar.
Easterling and I always used to go out on the field before everybody else did, and we ran around the field. And I remember before the Corona Del Mar game, the stands were packed. So we did our little run, and we were walking back, and Ernie's out there. He says, "How many people do you think are in that stands?" I said, "I don't know, a few thousand." He says, "No, it's probably 7,500, 8,000. Really? He says, "And you know what? You make a mistake, they're all going to watch it." And he walks away. That was Ernie's way of saying, okay, don't screw up.
For nearly the entire game, control of the ball went back and forth between Newport and Corona, but neither team could seem to put any points on the board.
We're playing the game, it's scoreless throughout the game, getting down to the short strokes, and Easterling returns that punt, down about the 9-yard line or so.
Easterling catches the ball, breaks the tackle, nobody's there, he's in the open.
I caught the punt and I took off running. I got down to about the 6-yard line, and Ferraro from Corona Del Mar came through and broke 5 of my ribs.
Cross the 20, here comes Ferraro. Easterling hit hard, finally down on the 9-yard line. Newport ball, first and goal.
Less than a minute to go, Alex Mode took it in for a touchdown, and that was kind of the turning point for us.
57 seconds to go in the game. Newport on the Corona 9-yard line. White to Mode, breaks into the clear. Touchdown, Newport! Alex Mode, behind solid blocking, scores the first touchdown of the game with less than a minute to go.
We wanted to win that game 7-0. I mean, it was like
you know, at least we're not going to be, you're going to have a win. We're not going to go losing every game or like that.
What we did, we didn't have any right. But suddenly we were knocking people down. And we were doing things. And so it became very encouraging. And then pretty soon, we believed.
The next game was against another local rival, Costa Mesa.
We're all buddies. Most all of us knew each other. And they were good, and we were, you know, not so good kind of thing. And they were a lot bigger than we were. Everybody was bigger than we were. But I do remember that game because we were buddies.
Newport took the lead early in the first half with a touchdown run by Alvin White,
In for the Sailor touchdown.
followed by a field goal.
White kick, it's up, and it is good. Good.
On defense, they held Costa Mesa to just one first down and only 19 yards gained at halftime. In the second half, Newport continued to dominate.
Costa Mesa desperate, looking for something to happen. Picked off by Schaefer, 20, 15, 10, 5. Touchdown, Sailors!
I was playing right linebacker and just went back to the curl zone, which is what you're supposed to do when you drop back pass. And Robin Senick, I think his name was, just kind of threw it right to me. Just had to kind of do one of these and snuck into the corner of the end zone.
It was like, that was my ambition for me going forward on the defensive side, was to get a pick, taking it for 6, because he got his picture in the paper, and it said, I remember the quote under his picture was linebacker's dream.
Costa Mesa was pretty rewarding. I mean, we pretty much stuffed them on defense. That's when we started to, the Johnson program started to evidence its effectiveness.
With the Newport team only just beginning to gel under Johnson's leadership, they prepared to face what everyone knew would be the toughest game of their season. Anaheim High School, under the leadership of legendary coach Claire Van Horbeck.
Probably the two best coaches in Southern California at that time at high school level were probably Ernie Johnson and Claire Van Horbeck at Anaheim.
I hadn't played him since 1967, and 66 was supposed to be his last game. All week long in the papers, when the last one's for Van, he's going to retire. A big banner across the Anaheim High School, when the last one for Van. And we killed him in the Coliseum in the finals.
1966 was the year that Ernie Johnson led El Rancho High School to win both state and national championships in a decisive victory over Anaheim.
After the game, I go out, his daughter's crying, his wife is, and I said, there's nobody in this world, Van, that I'd rather beat than you. But I'm sorry that you have to lose your last game. He said, last game? I'll see you again next year.
In 1967, Van Horbeck would return to beat El Rancho 28-14 in the CIF quarterfinals. In 1968, Anaheim would finish second in the Sunset League and then go on to win it in 1969.
He was a legend in Orange County and beyond, probably one of the most famous high school coaches in the history of California high school football. He innovated in ways that was a trend-setting in high school football, the first to utilize film and those kinds of things.
He was a sly old fox. He was a lot like Ernie. He and Ernie were two of a kind.
Just like Ernie, he would hole up, and study and go over and over stuff.
His coach's wife would forget who they were married to during the day. I mean, he worked them all the time.
Before the 1970 season had even started, Ernie was hard at work, preparing to face Van Horbeck.
I didn't make a dime all summer because what was I doing? Running Anaheim films, ruining my eyes, sitting on the top of a can, running films over a shower on a wall. That's the only place I had in this place to show film. And I ran at least 1,000 hours of film. And I studied to beat Van Horbeck.
I remember that we'd go watch film at lunch, and that's one of those things that I don't think high school coaches in general did back then.
He prepared us telling us these were good team, they're very well coached, you haven't beat them in X amount of years, I can't remember how many it was. They win league every year, not this time. He told us we were going to win it. We were going to beat Anaheim.
In the last 20 years, Newport Harbor had beaten Anaheim only once. In 15 of those 20 years, Anaheim had won the Sunset League Championship.
I think everybody aspires to do as well as you can, and your goal is to be a champion. I think our goal was to beat Anaheim.
Anaheim was just, in those years, they had the team to beat every year.
They always beat us, and it was kind of the big stumbling block for the team. And in the league play, those were the guys to beat.
Ernie says, you know what, guys? He says, they're a better team than you are. But I'm going to prepare you. I am going to prepare you to win. And I'm going to tell you how we're going to win. He was a fanatic at preparing.
Sometimes a guy's smarter than you, bigger than you, faster than you, but you can still, there's one thing you can outwork them.
The largest crowd in the history of Davidson Field is on hand tonight as hometown and unranked Newport Harbor takes on Anaheim, the #1 team in Orange County.
We couldn't believe there were that many people come to see us play.
I'll bet you a quarter at least, maybe as much as a third, of probably had people that were there that didn't have anything to do with Harbor or anybody else, but they were going to see that match.
Anaheim, they were like a college. They really were in the program, and they had so many kids, and the equipment that they had was phenomenal, and they had Anaheim football trucks, and we didn't have anything.
And these guys were not teenagers. There's no way. They got facial hair.
There's something about Anaheim where these guys it's like they hold them back 4 years. These guys all had full beards, kids, retirement plans. It was unbelievable.
I know at the coin toss, there was these gorillas, flipping the coin. I'm thinking, oh my God, it was going to be a tough game.
I was terrified, quite honestly. I just thought, there's no way we're going to get this thing done.
I said, we are outclassed, outsized, but I think we're smarter than they are.
Alvin White to kick off for the Sailors. The ball goes deep, carries into the end zone for a touchback.
People talk about how well Coach Johnson would prepare us. We were so well schooled on what they were going to do, especially on defense, that when they made a mistake, I knew it. We knew every step they were going to take. It was just remarkable how he had prepared us for that game.
I noticed after 15,000 foot of film that their defensive cornerback would always attack our receivers outside shoulder. So we're going to lure them outside, step inside, and there was never anybody there.
When they would stunt on defense, they'd shift. Every time they'd shift, I think it was a four-man front, they'd shift back, they'd stunt back to where they shifted from. And it was like the most obvious thing that nobody had ever picked up, and it was part of the Van Horbeck system.
We knew what plays they were running before they knew what plays they were running, it seemed like.
Anaheim 1st and 10. Pitch to McQueen. Tackled in the backfield by a gang of Sailors. McCulley at the helm. Rolls back. Looks to his left. Intercepted by Parrish Young.
After taking control of the ball away from Anaheim, big runs from Mike Easterling and Alvin White put Newport within 5 yards of the goal line. But a false start penalty, combined with a sack in the backfield, forced Newport to try for a field goal rather than go for the touchdown.
Here's White. Kick is up. Wide right, no good.
Missing the field goal, gave the ball back to Anaheim deep in their own territory. And then it happened.
When I saw that ball come out of his hand, I just could only think of one thing, was to get to it before it went out of the end zone.
Albritton strips him of the ball. Swick recovers. Touchdown, Newport.
I felt like I had superhuman speed at the time. It felt like I just floated, or just like a rocket, got to that ball and just landed on it in the end zone, and it counted for the touchdown. But I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and fortunate enough to where I could get to it before it rolled out.
When Albritton caused the fumble and Swick got it in the end zone, you could see the momentum turn.
Once we got it, we just had to hold on to it. I think the biggest fear is just while we were all watching that clock and wanted that game to be over.
We couldn't believe, we'd look at each other and say, I can't believe we're going to beat Anaheim. And we all thought the same thing. Let's not let anything happen. It was like you want to get that second clock down.
Late in the fourth quarter, with Newport leading 7-0, Anaheim made their first serious threat of the evening with a string of passes that put them on Newport's 40-yard line. But then Newport's defense took control, and on 4th and 9, Anaheim was forced to go for it. The pass was intercepted, and with just over 3 minutes left in the game, Newport tried to run out the clock. Eventually, Newport was forced to punt, but Anaheim had time only for a couple final desperation plays.
McCulley drops back, last play of the game, looking for a receiver, looking, it's in the air, knocked down by Randy Hamilton. And Newport, who has yet to allow a point this season, has beaten Anaheim 7-0. I can't believe it. The Sailors in the biggest upset.
Our defense did their job. It worked.
Winning a game defensively is, to me, one of the most beautiful things that happens in football. To see a team so inspired that they play way above their level. And that's what I thought Newport did that night.
We kicked their ass. The score didn't reflect it, but we absolutely kicked their ass.
I mean, it wasn't we squeaked it by. I mean, we we really thrashed them.
To go out there and take down Anaheim, it's probably one of the more satisfying things in my life, even now, of all sorts of things that have happened in my life. I can't explain it. It's just, it was the one thing that hadn't been achieved and virtually was told to us we couldn't do it.
It was like disbelief. Absolutely, it's like the Buster Douglas knockout of Mike Tyson. Like, where did this come from?
And then I can remember after the game going back towards the locker room, the song leaders and the cheerleaders were all, and Julie New ran up and kissed me, because we had beat. I mean, it was that big in the community.
I do remember the locker room afterwards, the excitement and just the jubilation that especially the guys like Jimmy and Alvin that played. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but I think Coach Johnson walked in and said, "You beach pussies did it."
Ernie Johnson, the master of disguises, may have outdone himself this time. He tried to pass off his Newport Harbor football team as a bunch of skinny, undernourished outcasts which had difficulty forming a symmetrical huddle. But he will not get away with it again. Not after the way poor little Newport manhandled supposedly invincible Anaheim High, ranked number 1 in Orange County and number 2 in the CIF.
It was the validation that we weren't a bunch of, we weren't only a bunch of beach guys.
Undefeated, untied, and unscored on, Newport Harbor invades Westminster High tonight in a 7 o'clock Sunset League football clash, seeking its 4th victim of the year and the 2nd in circuit battle.
Having accomplished the impossible in beating Anaheim, Newport's confidence was at an all-time high going into their game with Westminster.
We had won a couple. I think you started to think like you were really good. And that's a horrible mistake for a team that's getting good.
Though Newport took the lead with a touchdown in the first quarter, Westminster quickly answered with a touchdown of their own. It was the first time Newport had been scored on.
We just weren't playing. I mean, we didn't have any yardage. Offense just stunk. You know, we just weren't doing anything. People weren't blocking, and we weren't running hard enough.
After a scoreless second quarter, Newport went into the locker room at halftime to face Coach Johnson.
We weren't doing very well in the first half. And to everybody's surprise, we go cruising in the locker room at halftime. And all of a sudden, all of us saw Ernie Johnson that we had never seen before. He came in so lit up. I mean, he scared the hell out of me.
And he was so upset. I remember we're in that tight little locker room. It must have been the girls' locker room or something. So we're all around those cages and lockers, and he was trying to write in the chalkboard. He was so upset, he kept snapping the chalk. And then he just finally just cussed and hit the chalkboard and just yelled at us like, "What are you guys doing? Get out there and play better, you stink."
And we all sat there and we realized, okay, this is time of reckoning. We have to do this ourselves. I mean, he basically pointed out to us right there and then that we were the ones that were going to make the difference. So we better just figure out what we want to do. You know, and it goes back to all of his pep talks in the past was, you know, if you want it bad enough, you're going to get it.
Newport from the 21-yard line. Alvin White rolls to his right.
With a touchdown in the fourth quarter, Newport made it 14-7. But again, Westminster answered with a touchdown of their own and made good on a 2-point conversion. For the first time in the season, Newport found themselves behind with a score of 15-14.
White, the quarterback for the Satyrs.
With just over 6 minutes left to play, Newport was suddenly energized.
Easterling crossing the 40, the 50. He's down at the 39-yard line.
In 62 seconds, they drove 68 yards in just 4 plays, putting them back in the lead. 4 minutes later, Phil Metzger intercepted a tip pass and ran it back 51 yards for a touchdown. The extra point put Newport ahead 28-15 and sealed the victory. After coming from behind to crush Westminster, and then serving up one of their signature 7-0 wins over Marina High, Newport, with a record of 5-0, braced themselves for battle against Loera High School.
In my recollection, that was the hardest hitting game I remember being a part of. That was the most physical game. In fact, I got a concussion in that game.
The hitting was just so intense in that game because I could hear it from the sidelines. I standing right there.
Newport took control in the first quarter, methodically making their way downfield and scoring the first points of the game on a 16-yard touchdown pass.
Touchdown, Newport!
We got ahead right away. We were up 7-0. And I think we kind of started thinking, oh, here, okay, 7 points, that's all we need. You know, we don't get scored on.
We read in the papers how good we were, and we started believing too much in ourselves about it and our ability. And don't worry about it because Ernie's going to prepare us. Don't worry about, you know, practicing hard.
They wanted us bad because we beat their arch rival, Anaheim.
We knew you beat Anaheim, and we had come off Anaheim in a tough loss that we had a chance to win. And I was severely disappointed because I missed some plays that would have allowed us to win. So I was really ticked off at myself.
Though they started out ahead 7-0, by halftime, Newport would give up 2 touchdowns, putting them behind 12-7.
Lapin rolls to his left. He's got some room. Touchdown, Loera!
Still reeling from the shock of being behind, Newport suddenly found themselves with a chance to take back the lead.
White, plenty of time, looking long, complete to Simons. Simons inside the 10-yard line.
A sack pushed Newport back to the 20, but they were still within striking distance.
We had a call come in from the bench. We were supposed to run a sweep to the right, and we were on the left hash, and their whole line just slanted to that side as if they knew right where we were going. With my mouthpiece on, I'm trying to yell an audible, which would have put us on a run to the weak side, and nobody heard it except for me.
I heard it because I'm right next to him. You know, Grant and Terry and those guys obviously couldn't, loud game, all that stuff. And Alvin went back and started to run forward and just got absolutely murdered.
And of course, I got my butt kicked, and everybody was going, "Alvin, why did you go that way?"
That was a huge, huge play for us because you were going to take the lead. And that was maybe the key play of the game.
Fans, just 7 seconds left on the clock here, and Loera will be victorious over undefeated Newport Harbor 12-7. Newport now 4-1 on the season. Head coach Ernie Johnson.
We figured it out. Hey, we're not invincible. We can be beat.
Yeah, that was a disappointing night for us, but we were able to get past the loss, and Coach Johnson was able to regroup us and let us know that, you know, it's not the end of the world. You know, you're going to lose some games.
It was our peak and valley, and we were down in the low part. We needed to get back up. That next week of practice, everything clicked. People were working twice as hard as they were again, and coming back into reality of what we need to do the next week.
Newport rebounded with decisive victories over Western and Santa Ana, and were now set to face off against Huntington Beach for Southern California's Sunset League Championship.
Back in those days, you know, Sunset was huge. And then all of a sudden, teams that were winning other CIF divisions were moving up to the Sunset League, and all of a sudden now we're a loaded league.
I remember going into that game really not being certain that we were going to be able to win, and yet hoping and really giving it the effort that we could win that game and take the league championship. Huntington Beach, as I remember, were actually a pretty qualified team, and we knew it was going to be a very tough game.
That was the key game. I mean, we had to make it past that, and we were there.
Newport kicked off on a brisk Friday night, hoping to clinch the Sunset League title that had eluded them for so long.
To be truthful, the Newport offense wasn't anything spectacular, so that wasn't our big concern. But basically, I'm sure like every team that played Newport that year was trying to figure out how they could get the ball in the end zone.
Huntington's best chance of getting past Newport's defense rested on the shoulders of star quarterback Garth Wise.
Garth Wise, and he was awesome. You know, he could run.
Well, I know my mom made this voodoo doll of Garth Wise, and it actually worked because this guy was the biggest threat in the Sunset League.
I mean, Garth was a very good football player. A lot of people tried to make voodoo dolls out of Garth.
To Huntington's dismay, Newport held Wise to just 5 completions out of 20 passes and pulled down 4 interceptions. An interception by Sleepy Tripp early in the game put the Sailors on Huntington's 48-yard line. Just 4 plays later, Alvin White ran it in for the touchdown. In the second quarter, runs by Dan Seals for 26 and 12 yards would put Newport on the 5-yard line, and White would run it in again. Huntington was held scoreless for the entire game. The final score was 13-0, and Newport Harbor became Sunset League champions for the first time since 1942.
I mean, Sunset League, we were told before the year started or something like that we had no chance competing. And all of a sudden now we come out and we wind up winning. I mean, it was awesome. It was awesome.
I was just basking in the glory, the joy of what we had all accomplished. And I think even Ernie, you know, he was proud of the accomplishment.
It was almost not a fantasy, but it was just a dream come true. I think the success certainly extended beyond just us as a football team. I think the school and the community, certainly our Boosters Club, were just absolutely elated with the fact that we had achieved as much as we had in such a short amount of time with such limited talent.
You take a program, you bring someone in who put this together, and to take that in that 1 year period, do that, you know, go to the championship, get the playoffs, and then it's like the carpet yank, you know, it's like your parents getting divorced. It's gone, it's done, like that.
After the season was over, the team got the news that Ernie Johnson would be leaving Newport Harbor High School.
I think we were all heartbroken. I certainly was devastated. It was like, why, how could you do this to me? You know, it was like my dad. I mean, it was like, you know, he was leaving.
Devastating, really. I think that those of us had been so involved with him and all were really heartbroken of the fact that he was leaving and really didn't understand why.
He was somewhat of a father figure for a lot of the guys, and how disappointed they were, especially the juniors that were going to play the next year. How disappointing it was that he didn't stay, because he was just so important to their lives and changed the course of a lot of their lives.
Although Johnson said he was leaving for a better job, some point to interference from parents who didn't always agree with his way of doing things.
You know, he was tired of the bullshit that you know, the pressures of the parents. I mean, you know, there's no better way to screw up a coach or a team than having the parents, you know, get involved and you know, they tried offering him all sorts of money to stay, and he'd had enough.
It was like, you know, when Ernie picked me up by the deal and threw me back, oh, the parents had a problem. My dad had a problem, you know, oh my God. And then I said, Dad, you know, I screwed up. The guy got behind me. Forget it. You know, guys are dying in Vietnam. You know, what are you worried about, you know?
Hurt by the loss of Johnson, some team members decided not to play the following year rather than play for another coach.
I believed in Ernie, and I didn't want to go play for anybody else than Ernie.
Johnson went on to become head football coach at Cerritos College. In the next 4 years, under two different coaches, Newport Harbor won its third and fourth Sunset League championships.
The football really is meaningless to me. The victories, the losses, you know, like that made no, I mean, it was fun and important, but today, I mean, I carry with me what he taught.
My main idea as a coach was it was an opportunity to help use a kid's interest in football. It gave you a way to make him a better, productive person.
His ultimate motive was to get you prepared for life.
It wasn't just about football, it was about life and building character so that when you go out there in the real world and mom and dad aren't around anymore, you've got a few things to hold on to.
He taught me a lot of the qualities and the values of life that are important to think about at a time which was very important to be thinking about those decisions.
The relationship between football and life are, you can't just sit on your butt and expect to be successful. You've got to work hard, which means you've got to work not just hard, but harder than everybody else in order to achieve greatness.
He was the kind of man, in my opinion, that I think every boy would like to have had as a father. He could be tough, and he could be supportive, he could pat you in the back, but you knew that what you got from him was that he cared, and you got honesty and you got truth from him. And you got the best he could give you. And I think in turn, he got the best from each one of us.
We believed in our coach, and he prepared us and put out so much effort. You just knew how much he put into it. You didn't want to let him down. And now looking back at it, it's one of the greatest times of my life. The most fun and the most laughs and smiles you'll ever have.
I mean, I still talk about it, on a given day today, just being a part of that Ernie Johnson program.
You always like to think that what you were involved in was special and unique and nobody else had it. I suppose there's some of that going on, but I'll tell you what, I think about it all the time. I think about it all the time, about that year.
I hope that I have the same influence on my own kids, the kids I train, anybody else I might meet anywhere. I hope that I have the same influence he had on me and that I know he had on others.
I think back to this day, did I love football or did I love Coach Johnson? I don't even know what the distinction was there, because I'm not that tough guy football guy, but I certainly was a guy that wanted or Coach Johnson to say good job.
That's really what that season meant more profoundly to everybody else on that team, was to give us an opportunity to experience the value and benefit of genuine, honest, caring people.
I'm, without question, as rich a person as you've ever met. I don't have things, I don't have money, but I have all you guys. You'll remember the things, not that you have, but the thing that you were. And when people talk about you, they will say, he was a pretty good guy.